To be honest, I wasn't sure if I was going to make a video on some of the new resynced gameplay and information that dropped the other day, but then IGN released an exclusive clip of a new cutscene with Edward and Caroline that I think is really good and I want to talk about it, so we might as well go over some of the other new stuff too. This is the aforementioned new scene between Edward and Caroline that was briefly mentioned in the initial unveiling of the game that they said was written by Darby McDevitt himself, and yeah, you can tell. The writing, presentation, and performances here are leagues above what the average modern Assassin's Creed cutscene has looked like the last few years. I mean, once again, you immediately see what a difference mocap makes. The subtleties in body language and facial expression, just the fluidity of the performances, it allows for so much more subtext than what is possible in those procedurally generated scenes. Between this and the Valley of Memory Mirage DLC, it's good to know Ubisoft is still capable of making cutscenes like this. The problem is, we just don't see it nearly consistently enough. Presentation aside though, I just think it's a really well written scene that adds some further context to the dynamic of Edward and Caroline's relationship, and Edward's motivations for wanting to become a privateer. Doesn't matter how many years it's been, Darby clearly still understands his characters. And while there aren't many Edward and Caroline scenes in the original game, there's only 4 of them, their relationship is explored a lot more in the Black Flag novel. Caroline came from money, her father was a wealthy tea merchant, and she denied the arranged marriage her father set up for her to the son of a wealthy landowner to marry Edward instead, which of course greatly angered her father because he was wanting to use Caroline's marriage to climb the social ladder. And Edward, being the son of a poor sheep farmer on his parents' farm, felt extremely guilty that she gave up a luxurious, comfortable life to be with him. He felt like a failure of a man for not being able to provide for her, and we see that communicated in this rather brief scene. First of all, it starts with Caroline saying she's feeling nauseous and holding her stomach, very obviously foreshadowing that she's pregnant with Jenny, as Edward makes an effort to bring her a delicacy with the hot chocolate. You can see how excited and proud of himself he is, talking about how things like this will be the new normal once he's become a privateer and obtains great wealth for the both of them, which, as he goes on about it, you can clearly see on Caroline's face that she doesn't want him to go. Just another little reason why mocap is important, and you can see how quickly Edward's excitement is crushed when Caroline states she's had hot chocolate many times before. He thought he was treating her to something special, but once again feels he's failed to adequately provide and support her in the way she was used to living. It only fuels his desire to set out on the West Indies and come back a man of status even more. Caroline tries to cheer him up and have him drink the hot chocolate since he's never had it, which is a little sweet moment, but you can still see the lingering dissatisfaction across Edward's face. The scene perfectly encapsulates the dynamic between the two. Also, what I love about this, I don't know if it's intentional, knowing Darby it probably is, but in Assassin's Creed 3's tie-in novel Forsaken, Edward treats young Haytham to chocolate for his birthday. There's even a reference to it in the final scene of Black Flag.
But won't your arms tire?
Hey, I'm not so old as that. But if they do, then we shall quit this posh gig and go and meet your mother for some chocolate at White's. How's that sound?
Yes, please.
Okay, hush now.
So they've made it into this really cool full circle moment where we now have this scene where it took like all the money Edward had to secure this one mug for Caroline, and then in London, when Edward has finally obtained the wealth and status he set out for, he's treating his son to it consistently. Okay, actually, as I was writing this, I found Darby's IGN interview that confirmed that was intentional, so it makes that line at the end not just a reference to the novel, but a nice, satisfying little button end. Now I kinda wish they would add a scene at the end of Edward and Haytham drinking some hot chocolate together to further drive that home. Hey, Haytham, why did you never get Connor hot chocolate? I mean, you couldn't give him Lee, it's the least you could do. This scene is going to slot in somewhere near the beginning after Edward tells Caroline he wants to go privateering, but before she leaves him. So the following Caroline flashbacks will be pushed back further into the story. Darby also confirmed that he wrote 2 other Caroline-related scenes for Resynced. In one, we'll now get to hear the letter Edward wrote to Caroline near the end of the game when he finally sends word for her to join him. That's probably going to be heartbreaking knowing Caroline's fate. And the other is a rewrite of Bart Roberts' final scene that will somehow involve Caroline now. Darby wanted to reformat that final interaction with Roberts to better fit the narrative, now that the game no longer has the modern-day reveal of John from IT being the Sage. In the original scene, he talks about how he regrets being born too early and not being able to see Juno, which would feel quite out of place now without that connection to Juno in the modern day. Darby's goal with the new Caroline scenes was to not only show a more loving, caring side of Edward with Caroline, but also further hammer home that she's always on his mind. Even though she's not in the game much, her presence looms over the whole narrative. These extra scenes will reinforce the idea that Edward is always thinking of her. If the other two scenes are as good as this one, I'm very excited to see them. Anyways, I don't want to spend the whole video talking about one scene, I'm getting a little carried away, but it's not often these days that there's a cutscene worth talking about in this amount of depth in Assassin's Creed. Regardless, let's move on to some of the new gameplay and information. I just recently made a video talking about and analyzing Stede Bonnet, and how I was hoping to get some more closure to what happens to him in Resynced, if possible seeing his actual death. And in some pretty convenient timing, they announced he'll have a new mission and epilogue in sequence 9 of Resynced to give him a proper send-off. We'll receive a letter from Stede asking us to meet him on Mystery Island to uncover what happened to him. In the original game, Stede left some treasure for Edward on Mystery Island that was available as part of a DLC. That's where you unlock Stede's gentleman outfit. It seems they're repurposing that location to be where you complete these new quests. Now, Stede doesn't die on Mystery Island, he's hanged in Charlestown, so I don't know if this means we'll actually see his death, or if we'll just learn about it afterwards when we reach Mystery Island. If we do get to be there for his hanging, I imagine it's going to be a very hard scene to watch. Stede doesn't have some epic final stand or chilling last words like Blackbeard. It's said that he broke down crying and pleading for his life. So I can only imagine the impact a scene like that could have on Edward and the player if done right. I hope we get to see it, but at the very least, there should be more closure to his character than what is offered in the original game, which is what I was hoping for. Speaking of Blackbeard, as we know, he too will be getting new quests. One will be in Sequence 8, a new treasure hunt. That's what the new Health to the Company cutscene they showed us is from. That one is also mocapped, and they released the behind-the-scenes footage of them filming that scene, which was really interesting. I like seeing raw behind-the-scenes stuff like this, where you see them doing a bunch of takes and trying out alternate versions of the scene. I find it very fascinating. Then, as we've known, there's going to be a new late-game chapter with 8 new missions that unlocks once you reach the final sequence of the game, called A World Without Gold, obviously in reference to Blackbeard's final words. It's supposed to revolve around Lieutenant Robert Maynard, the man who killed Blackbeard. He's technically in the original game as a generic NPC, but they're giving him more character and a larger presence in Resynced. It seems like this chapter will be dedicated to the legacy of Blackbeard and perhaps avenging his death. Apparently each of the new officers will also have some sort of connection and personal vendetta against Maynard, and will play significant roles in this questline. And Bonnie should have an expanded role as Quartermaster of the Jackdaw as well. Her time as Quartermaster is rather short-lived in the original game, since she replaces Adewale at the very end, so I'm looking forward to seeing more of her in that role. I am curious how this questline will resolve though, because the real Robert Maynard didn't die until 1751, nearly 30 years after the end of Black Flag. He actually outlives Edward, so I'm not quite sure how they're going to tackle that. Blackbeard is of course extremely memorable in the original Black Flag. Mark Bonner gives an incredible performance, and his death is one of the most impactful scenes of the game, with probably the best and most iconic line of the game. So I'm always down to see more of Blackbeard and bring some more closure to his end as well. Apparently we're going to be seeing him in an Animus Rift too. They've confirmed there's going to be 4 Animus Rifts in the game, which isn't really a lot. I mean, we don't know how long each one is, but it's definitely going to end up being significantly shorter than the original game's modern day that it's replacing. These rifts will focus on what-if scenarios for Blackbeard, Edward, and James Kidd. It's continuing the new plotline started in Shadows. I'm starting to fully lose hope that we're ever going to see the continuation of the Reader/Basim storyline from the end of Valhalla, which, if that is the case, is very frustrating and disappointing to me. But it wouldn't be the first time Ubisoft completely dropped the ball with the handling of a modern-day storyline. Or the second, for that matter. Darby even said in his interview he has no involvement in this current modern-day plotline, it's a completely separate team, so I'm not holding my breath. There will be numerous changes, large and small, to the mission structure throughout the game to provide more options for completing objectives and to better fit the remake's mechanics. I already played one such example I pointed out in my previous video, where there's now an alternative way to secure the diving bell in sequence 6. Some of the parkour pathing, like when chasing Duncan at the beginning for instance, is different, or where you now have to dive underwater after the shipwreck in the beginning. And again, probably the mission type that has received the largest overhaul are the tailing missions. Like I've said plenty of times, I don't mind tailing on a conceptual level. It always made sense for an assassin to tail targets. The problem with Black Flag, and this really extends to AC3 too, was the sheer volume of them. Additionally, some were very slow paced, and they were very restrictive, forcing desynchronization if you were detected, which could obviously be very frustrating. We've already seen a couple examples of how Ubisoft Singapore attempts to address these issues by removing instant fail states, and introducing more ways to get the necessary information needed for your objective. Whether it's killing the target and picking up a note or object like a key on their body, or investigating in a new area. They did also say some of the tailing missions have been replaced with more stealth or investigation related objectives. We got more gameplay and info on the new officer abilities. Lucy has Perfect Brace, which if you time your brace with the impact of an enemy attack, you'll take significantly reduced damage. The Padre gives you Ram Dash, a dedicated ramming mechanic like what you got after defeating all the legendary ships in the original. I do wish you could cleave ships in two, like Odyssey. I always thought that was a really cool addition to the naval combat. And the last officer, Deadman Smith, enables the broadside cannons to fire an extra salvo, dramatically increasing firepower. While I don't really have high expectations for these officer questlines after playing the introduction of Lucy's a little while back, I do think it'll be nice to have more named, fleshed out characters on the Jackdaw to serve as the voice of the crew. Outside of your quartermasters, Adewale and Anne, the rest of the crew were always just generic NPCs that gave you no real reason to care about them. Not that I think adding a few officers makes a massive difference in that department, as I assume most of the crew members will still be blank slates, but it'll hopefully be refreshing to have some new personalities aboard. Or annoying, only time will tell. At least we get a pet. The Templar hunts, my personal favorite side content type in Black Flag, are getting a bit of a rework. They said it's to meet the standards of modern parkour. Funny, I didn't know modern parkour had standards. To also provide a commensurate challenge and updating the narrative to better fit into the updated experience, whatever that means. I love the Templar hunts, seeing Edward interact with some of the assassin bureau leaders with these little side stories assassinating Templars. The one where Edward helps an assassin named Upton kill his traitorous brother was particularly memorable to me.
I have no family, no wife of my own. What is the point of living? Let them kill me. You are my best friend. Come here, I'll kill you.
They're a good time. Hopefully whatever these reworkings are don't completely mess them up. They're adding a little more flesh to the bone of the assassination and naval contracts, giving some of the targets additional dialogue and deeper motivations, which I'm all for. I like assassination contracts. They fulfill the basic assassin fantasy, but they're all very samey and can certainly be repetitive, so any changes to make them feel a little more varied and distinct is welcome to me. Milo Vondergraaf will be an actual meetable character in Great Inagua now. He's the one responsible for all of the naval contracts in the original game, but you never actually met him. Once you completed all the contracts, you'd get this special mission where you have to help his ship escape, which earns you the best pistols in the game, the Golden Flintlock pistols. It should be interesting to finally put a face to the man we do all these contracts for. The hideout itself in Great Inagua has seen a pretty extensive facelift as well. You can still build and upgrade some of the original structures like the general store to unlock better weapons and outfits, or the brothel to hire dancers to blend with for free, but there's also some new buildings like the Fisherman's Wharf and Treasure Dealer that will allow you to make a passive income, not unlike some of the other hideout systems in the franchise we've had. You can decorate the manor itself a little more with ship models, weapons, artifacts, and paintings. To be honest, I've never been one to really care for the interior decorating aspect of these hideouts. Even in Shadows, I didn't interact with it much, but some people are really into that stuff. They're adding another new character to the hideout, the butler of the villa, Bernard Woodhouse. He apparently has some secrets you'll uncover through collecting relics and art for the villa. That's cool, I guess, although excuse me if I refuse to trust anyone involved with running Edward's property after Reginald Birch. There's going to be a bunch of new little world moments and ambient dialogue scattered around the world. They confirmed each of the plantations will have a little side story like the one I played in Matanzas, where the captain was feeding his disobedient guards to a crocodile. There are now difficulty options, something that was of course absent in the original game. When I die, the video ends, it's probably going to be a little more difficult this time around. I made it pretty far into the original without a single death. It's a fairly easy game. I look forward to bringing that series out of retirement for Resynced. And being able to individually adjust the difficulty of each gameplay system is a very nice option to have. Oh, and you can now also manually change the time of day like a lot of the recent AC games. It took them a lot of time to add that in Shadows because lighting and time of day had a big impact on the stealth experience and they didn't want people exploiting that, but I'm sure many will appreciate having that feature on launch this time. Since this is probably my last video on Resynced before the game comes out, barring any massive news, I figured I'd dedicate the last section of this video to some of my lasting areas of concern. One would still just be the general fluidity with the gameplay and animations. Credit where credit is due, the parkour animations have looked vastly improved from what they initially showed nearly 2 months ago now, but the assassination animations are still not as seamless as I'd like them to be, certainly not to the level of the original game, which is disappointing for a remake. This double assassination in the new gameplay actually looks a bit smoother. I don't know if they actually tweaked it or if it just happened to look better in this particular instance, but the camera cut doesn't seem to be as harsh and jarring. Though I still wish they would do away with the camera jump cuts entirely whenever you perform double assassinations. They do this as a way to hide the player character and enemies being repositioned for the animation so it can play out properly. In the old games, the enemies would kinda have to be forced into the correct place for the double assassination to play out, which honestly was never a big deal to me. I think it's well worth the trade-off, and still looks a lot better than this jarring camera cuts they had in Shadows and are carrying forward in this game. Plus, the original Black Flag and all the Kenway games actually had unique animations when you were coming at enemies for double assassinations from an angle to help smooth over and accommodate for their positioning. But I haven't seen any of those animations in Resynced yet, so I don't believe those are returning. I'd bring up Hidden Blade combat, but I feel like that's beating a dead horse at this point. I'm sure Ubisoft Singapore is aware of this, considering it's the most heavily requested feature from the community right now. But who knows if anything will result from that, only a month away from the game's release. And even if they were to add proper Hidden Blade combat, it's not going to be like the original game obviously, it's going to be within the hitbox combat framework. So I don't think it'll be as smooth and satisfying as it was in the Kenway games, but still better than nothing I suppose. A more classic control scheme with low and high profile based movement would also be up there on my wish list. Ropotopolous made a really good video recently outlining how it could work, so I really hope that's something Ubisoft Singapore is considering. I think if this series is going to be serious about improving parkour and social stealth going forward, it's an absolute must-have. We've had this streamlined control scheme for far too long in my opinion. Also, benefits to movement and control aside, I just like walking around cities for immersion without having to ever so gently press the left stick forward. Those are kind of my main hangups. I don't know how realistic it is to hope for any of these things to be implemented less than a month before the game releases though. The new Edward and Caroline scene has put me a little more at ease at how the new main story cutscenes are gonna look at least. That was a major concern before. Again, as I've been saying since it was first revealed, there are some areas of concern and things I wished got a little more attention, but overall I still think it's looking pretty good and we really won't have to wait much longer to get our hands on it. Thank you guys just for the support in general over the years. What is this, the 4th new AC game I've covered since starting my channel? We're coming up on 7 years of this channel existing. That's almost a decade, are you serious? Time is going way too fast, how has it already been that long? Okay, I'll have my existential crisis later. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed, as always, I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing if you're new. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.